Okie doke. We are traveling on this journey. We finally got to what I had been anticipating for so long. And this has really turned out to be a lot of fun to study this and to go through it. But right now, we're at the point where we've seen both Israel and Judah get removed from the land. And we've talked about that in the past couple of weeks. And last week, actually also in the past couple of weeks, we've talked about the prophet Daniel and how he responded to being in exile, and how Yah had his hand upon him. His ministry continued, and Daniel spoke among the royalty, and his works were done among the royalty. Ezekiel was among the people, and Ezekiel was I guess you could almost say he was an object lesson for the people with all that he was going through. And we showed how both Daniel and Ezekiel were faithful and in all that they were to do, all that Yah gave them to do. Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at what happened among that faithfulness is that Yah gave each of them some pretty intense prophecy to share with those immediately, but it's still applicable to us too. All right? And like we did last week, or like we did the last couple of weeks, we'll start with Daniel and we'll touch on Ezekiel after that. I am not going to go into depth into these prophecies. Most of them are very famous. There's no less than 150 bookshelves worth of books on either one of these prophets. But as we kick off, I want to tie this all the way back to Torah, all the way back to Leviticus, because it's all one story. We're not losing any flow. We're continuing right down through the story as we have been. And if we remember in Leviticus 26, verse 14, Yah was telling them, but he told them the blessings that they would have. And then in verse 14, he says, but if you do not obey me and do not observe all these things, and you jump down into verse 33, it says, I will scatter you among the nations and draw out the sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. Now, we've talked about that before. Now, in Leviticus 26, we're going to jump down to verse 40, and there's another but. But if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers with their unfaithfulness in which they were unfaithful to me, and that they have also walked contrary to me, and that I have also walked contrary to them, and brought them into the land of their enemies. Who did that? Yah did that. All right? If their uncircumcised hearts are humbled, and they accept their guilt, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, my covenant with Isaac, my covenant with Abraham. I will remember the land. And in verse 43 it says, the land also shall be left empty by them, and will enjoy its Sabbaths while it lies desolate without them. They will accept their guilt because they despised my judgments and because their soul abhorred my statutes. All right, so we're going to start with Daniel, and we're going to pick it up in Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9, and we'll start in verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was the king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by the books the number of years specified by the word of Yah through Jeremiah the prophet, that they would accomplish 70 years in desolation of Jerusalem. Okay, so by this time, Nebuchadnezzar has come and gone. His son has been overthrown. The captivity under Babylonian captivity is no more. Now it's under the Medo-Persian. And Daniel understood that time was closing, or had closed, because of what Jeremiah wrote. He understood the word of the Lord through the prophet of Jeremiah. He says, "Then I set my face toward Yahweh Elohim." I need to make a correction. A couple of weeks ago we talked about this, and I asked everybody what direction you think he was praying, and I said east. We all said east. It's wrong. It was west. He was on the east side of the river. So when he looked back and prayed, he was praying towards the west. But he was praying towards Jerusalem. Okay? I had Max point that out the other day. I appreciate that. But he set his face towards Yahweh Elohim to make request by prayer and supplication and fasting and sackcloth and ashes. Now this is 70 years into his ministry. Okay? He understands what Jeremiah has said, what Yah has said through Jeremiah. And then in verse 4 he says, "And I prayed to Yahweh Elohim and made confession and said, O Lord, great and awesome Elohim, who keeps his covenant and his mercy with those who love him, and with those who keep his commandments." And listen to what happens, listen to what starts to happen in verse 5. "We have sinned and committed iniquity. We have done wickedly and rebelled, even by departing your precepts and your judgments." Now remember when we went back to Leviticus just a couple of minutes ago, if they will confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers, okay? Daniel says "we" in this chapter, or "our," like 30 times. He's doing exactly what Leviticus said to do. Verse 6, "Neither have we heeded your servants and your prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings and our princes, to our fathers and all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face, as it is this day, to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and all Israel, those near and those far off, in all the countries to which you have driven them, because of the unfaithfulness which they have committed against you. O Lord, to us belongs shame of face, to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To Yahweh Elohim belong mercy and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. We have not obeyed the voice of Yahweh Elohim to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants. Yes, all Israel has transgressed your law and has departed so as not to obey your voice. Therefore the curse of the oath was written in the law of Moses and the servant of Elohim have been poured out on us because we sinned against him." So in verse 11, Daniel's recognizing Leviticus 26 and probably Deuteronomy 28 as well. These things being poured out on them because they were told that in the Torah. Verse 12, "And he has confirmed his words which he spoke against us and against our judges who judged us, by bringing upon us great disaster, for under the whole heaven such is never done as what has been done to Jerusalem. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this disaster has come upon us, yet we have not made our prayers before Yahweh Elohim, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand your truth." So here's another recognition that Daniel is having. They haven't done this yet. "Therefore, Yah has kept the disaster in mind and brought it upon us, and Yahweh our Elohim is righteous in all his works which he does, though we have not obeyed his voice. And now, O Yahweh, our Elohim, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and made yourself a name as it is this day. We have sinned, we have done wickedness. O Yah, according to all your righteousness, I pray, let your anger and your fury be turned away from your city Jerusalem, your holy mountain. Because of our sins and our iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people are a reproach to all those around us. Verse 17. Now therefore, our Elohim, hear the prayer of your servant and his supplications. And for Yah's sake, cause your face to shine on your sanctuary, which is desolate. O my Elohim, incline your ear to hear. Open your eyes and see our desolation, the city which is called by your name. For we do not present our supplications before you because of our righteous deeds, but because of your great mercies. Another big recognition. Verse 19. O Yah, forgive. Yah, listen and act. Do not delay for your own sake, my Elohim, for your city and your people are called by your name. Verse 20. Now while I was speaking, praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people, and presenting my supplications before Yahweh my Elohim for the holy mountain of God, yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. Pay attention to this verse. He's been out of Jerusalem for over 70 years. And he's still facing Jerusalem in the evening when he's supposed to be facing. Not because he can't be there. He's facing and he's remembering that evening offering. Because he's in Babylon. He's not making an evening offering in Babylon other than his prayer and supplication. That's the offering he's making. Verse 22. And he informed me and he talked to me and he said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you skill to understand. And verse 23 says, at the beginning of your supplications, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore consider the matter and understand the vision. Again, he's been out 70 years. And he says, he told him, for you are greatly beloved. Remember what we picked up from Ezekiel last week in Ezekiel 14:14. Even if these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they would only deliver themselves. I brought them three up for a reason. And as you dig into it, you find out those three were living outside of Yah's land at the time, yet they were still found righteous in Yah's eyes. All right, so Daniel is given a big revelation about Messiah, and even that that sacrifices are going to return, yet they're going to be cut off. So he's getting an inclination that they are going back in, all right? But there's a time frame. So in verse 24, this is so popular, this one here. 70 weeks are determined for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end to sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, to seal up a vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy one. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 70 weeks and 62 weeks. The streets shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. Verse 26. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with the flood, and till the end of the war of desolations are determined. Verse 27, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of that week he shall bring an end to sacrifices and offerings. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolation. Now, I'm not going to break all of that down, but I do want to mention just a couple of things. Everybody considers that there's two different princes. Okay, one is the Messiah, and he's going to be cut off. And it's not the Messiah that's going to come back and destroy the city. Let's see. And that aligns through all the Jewish sources, all the Messianic sources, all the Christian sources, all the way across the board. That's. So Daniel was in exile, and he's given a vision of the Messiah coming, and he's going to be cut off, and perhaps another temple. It's not necessarily called out. There have been sacrifices without the temple. But when you couple this with Ezekiel 40 through 48, it's probable there'll be a third temple. And that's even being prepared for today. You hear that in Israel. With sacrifices, and they'll be cut off. Now, he gets that prophecy, which, by the way, we're still looking for this to happen. We know, and this is the thing about Yahweh's prophecies. Part of it has already taken place, right? We know the Messiah was cut off. We know who it was, okay? But we're still waiting on that covenant. We're still waiting on this to take place. So some of it is futuristic. It was all futuristic for him, okay? But he's given this because he tells us what he's going to do before he does it. So, in chapter 7 and chapter 12, he sees the Messiah as the ever-ruling king, which is chronologically after the Messiah being cut off and the sacrifices is stopped. But we're not given a timeline between the time that the Messiah is cut off and these sacrifices are cut off. We don't have a timeline. We know it's been a minute, though, don't we? Because it hasn't happened yet, and we're still waiting. So part of this has taken place, and part of it is yet to come. So I say that, remember that he's in exile. He's talking to the people in exile. We are in exile. We talked about hope, and I think it was one of these songs today. We were talking about having hope. He's coming back. He said he's going to do everything he said he's going to do. So we know this is coming. And at the end, he is the king. What happens in between then is in his time, on his timetable, and it will line up with everything he says. Whether we understand it and how it lines up, that's irrelevant right now. Because once it happens, we'll be able to see in hindsight that he did just what he said he was going to do. So, Daniel got a big prophecy for the people in exile, applicable to us today. I wanted to point out one more thing. How many how many of you are familiar with Psalm 51? David's repentant prayer, right? Okay, that was for him individually. Deep, deep prayer. This one is for us corporately. You see the difference there? And this is happening while Daniel and the rest of Judah is outside the land. All right. So again, we know now how Daniel lived while he was in exile. We know he was among the rulers, and that's where his ministry was. We know he was obedient for the whole 70 years, and then some. We know he was given this prophecy of the future king, and what was going to take place. So now let's move on to Ezekiel. And Ezekiel just absolutely fascinates me, because starting from I'm going to start from chapter 34. I'm just going to get into it. And in Ezekiel chapter 34, that's where I'm going to start. And we're going to skim through 34 through 39. I'm just going to summarize each chapter as we go, and I want you to watch the progression that takes place. Some of it has already happened. Some of it has yet to happen. So, Ezekiel 34, we've studied that. It's been months now, but we've looked at that closely a while back. Ezekiel 34 is where the bad shepherds and the mean sheep were hanging out. And they were feeding themselves and muddying the water. And in that passage, Yah rebukes Israel's leadership, the shepherds, for feeding themselves instead of the flock. And because they failed, Yah himself promises to shepherd his own people, to gather the scattered sheep, to heal the wounded, and to judge between sheep and sheep. And in Ezekiel 34, 22 and 23, it says, "Therefore I will save my flock, and they will no longer be a prey, and I will judge between sheep and sheep. I will establish one shepherd over them, and he shall feed them. My servant David, he shall feed them and be their shepherd." Well, now this can't be literally David, because David's been dead for hundreds of years at this point. This is David's son, Messiah, the king. This chapter is foundational because the restoration has to begin with the leadership. That's where the restoration is beginning, and that's what he's doing here. Now, Ezekiel 35 and 36, there's a judgment and a heart renewal. Now, I picked up something new this past week as I was studying through this. In chapter 35, it judges Mount Seir. Edom is what it's doing. And Edom is not only a nation, it represents perpetual hostility towards Yah's people. I'm going to give a couple examples of that in a bit, of where they are after the nation's gone. The term Edom is given to hostility towards Yah's people. Verse 36 pivots to hope. Israel's restored, but not for their sake, but for Yah's holy name. The land is renewed, and most importantly, the people received a new heart and a new spirit. And that's Ezekiel 36, 26 and 27. I will give you a new heart and a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. It's not lawlessness. The Torah is written on the heart, exactly as is promised elsewhere in Scripture. Now, this is confirmed as taking place through John 3, the born-again experience. It's also written by the author of Hebrews. He quotes this specifically. He quotes this passage. He talks about the new covenant. Okay? Going back to Ezekiel 34, we talked about John 10 and Yeshua calling himself the Good Shepherd, that shows the fulfillment beginning of that, the fulfillment beginning of what he said in Ezekiel 34. He's not done with that yet, because he's still gathered us, and there's more that have to be gathered, and he's shepherding us, and there's more. So that's an in-progress thing that's going on. Also, again, it's the people in the exile that he's finding. He's rounding people up for the greater exodus. Ezekiel 37, the resurrection and the reunion. The two prophets, the two prophetic acts. Here's what's happening. The valley of dry bones. Israel appears utterly dead, but Yah brings them back to life. And that's in Ezekiel 37:11. Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. And indeed, they indeed say, our bones are dry, our hope is lost, and we ourselves are cut off. Romans 9:6 says, but it is not that the word of Yah has taken no effect, for they are not all Israel who are of Israel. So, and then in Romans 11 it says all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So, the dry bones, they're in the land. Just he brings these dry bones back to life. The two sticks, the divided kingdom is reunited into one people under one king. The resurrection first, unity next, kingship follows. That's in, and then the two main verses I'm pulling out of that are verses 5 and 6 of Ezekiel 37. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, to these bones, surely I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. I will put sinews on you and bring flesh upon you, cover you with skin, put breath in you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am Yah. Now that Hebrew word for breath there means the breath, the wind, the spirit. Ezekiel is watching this take place. And that could be tied to, you think about the resurrections. Lazarus' resurrection was a big lesson before Yeshua's. That was a big to do. Yeshua showed his power there long before his own resurrection. And then Ezekiel 38 and 39. These are all things that we are still looking forward to in one way or another. These are still applicable to us today. Gog and Magog leads a massive coalition against a regathered, peaceful Israel. Yah allows the invasion, not because Israel is weak, but so he alone can be revealed as holy when he utterly destroys the enemy. The victory is unmistakably divine. No human glory, no shared credit, no nothing. He does it. And I just talked about, and kind of a recap of what I just said. I just talked about chapter 34. Yeshua comes out in John 10 and says he's the good shepherd. He's still shepherding us today. Mount Seir, okay. Edom. Edom as a nation is no longer with us, but Edom as a symbol of hostility is. In Isaiah 34, verses 5 through 8. In Isaiah 63, verses 1 through 6. And in Micah 1, verses 2 through 4. You'll see that there's a judgment coming on Edom, those hostile towards Yah. Again, chapter 36 is echoed in Hebrews 8. Dry bones is an interesting one, and the two sticks. We know the two sticks are going to come together. We know it's going to, obviously, it's going to be the hand of Yah that brings them together. And then with Gog and Magog, there's some, as many times as I've read through Ezekiel 38 and 39, there's some things that just, you don't see how they can come together right now. But Yah will make Israel live in peace. And then it's Yah that puts the hook in Gog and Magog's jaw to draw them back. And then, of course, in 40 through 48, we see Ezekiel lays out the kingdom, but he doesn't see the new heaven and the new earth of Revelation. Now, I want to talk about the house of Israel and the house of Judah for a minute, and about them being separated. And I want to reveal a pattern that I see being repeated, a pattern that we're all familiar with in here. And let's review the pattern I'm talking about first. I want to look all the way back to Abram, and in Genesis 12, Yah chooses Abram. In Genesis 15, Abram was counted. Abram believed Yah, and it was counted as righteousness. And in Genesis 17, he's no longer Abram. His name was changed to Abraham. Okay, we're all very familiar with that, right? So he starts out with this one man that is, in essence, he's adopted. He's been told to separate from everything else but Yah. Okay? And from Abraham, Yah chose Isaac. Yah chose Jacob. Yah changed Jacob's name to Israel. Yah put Israel in Egypt. Yah chose Moses. Yah delivered Israel from Egypt by Moses. Now, that's the first step. Yah separated his people from the world, from Egypt, a picture of the world. All right? Then, now that Israel is out of there and they're at the mountain, he subdivides again. He takes the Levites from the Israelites. Okay? And the Israelites are all around those camps. The Levites are chosen out, and they're a little bit closer to Yah. And with that being a little bit closer to Yah, there's a little bit more responsibility. Okay? And then from the Levites themselves, Yah does it again. He chooses Aaron to be the high priest. Now, Aaron is the closest to Yah. He's got the most responsibility. So you see how that worked? He brought his people out of the nations, out of Egypt, which is a picture of the world. He brought his people out. He subdivided his people. From Israel, he brought out the Levites, and from the Levites, he brought out Aaron. I see the same thing happening. He takes Israel and he divided them. He separated Judah. Judah was called to carry the scepter from Genesis 49. He separated Judah. He's separating the kingly leadership now. Now that he's separated Judah from the rest of them, he separates David from Judah. Okay? So now David is told that his son will have the kingdom forever. So you've got the kingly leadership and the priestly leadership followed the same pattern. Okay? Judah was given more responsibility, and they carried that responsibility out. Paul tells us the reason we have the Torah, the reason we have an identity still, the Jews have an identity still, is because of the Jews and what they've done. That responsibility to hold on to the Torah. Now there's some argument on between holding on and keeping. there's a little bit of a difference there, but we have it today because of what they did. Okay, that responsibility was carried out, and then from Judah came David as the king. All right. I got way ahead of myself on my notes here. So now, we know we're waiting on a king right now. So again, this is another prophet that has given us prophecies, and we see this pattern. He set aside the priesthood, the high office of high priest for himself by subdividing as he went. He did the same thing with the kingship, and we're waiting on that king to return. This all ties back together. It all ties to Leviticus 26. It comes all the way back around. Now, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to turn right back around and we're going to watch and observe how they got back into the land with Ezra and Nehemiah. We'll talk a little bit about Esther. It's important when we go through how they got back into the land, because there's a lot of similarities with the way that they came into the land from Babylon and that captivity to how they came into the land in 1948. To start off with, neither one of them was led by Joshua or Yeshua. When they went back in the land, they did not go back in. Well, remember, when you read in Joshua, the commander of Yah's army was the one that actually led them in, and Joshua went with him, right? When you read it in detail. And we're going to see some things like that we need to pay attention to because it's relevant today. It's relevant today with what's going on in Israel. All right. So we're going to see them go back into the land, and we're going to see some things that took place in the first Exodus. We're going to see some things that took place back then. We're going to see them happening in a little bit in a different way. In a different way. The things that happened back in Egypt, now they're not happening in Egypt. They're happening in the land when we go back in there. So that's going to be over the next several weeks. I'm sorting this out now. I want to talk about the entrance into the land. I don't have it sorted out yet though. But we'll be working through Ezra and Nehemiah. Esther will be included in there. We're going to end up going back into the land, and then we're going to follow that all the way down to Yeshua arriving on the scene. And then we can pick it up from there and end up where we're at today. But the whole gist of this is finally coming together. I've waited a long time for this, to see how that story way back in Genesis, as it began, is still applicable to us. It's the same story. It's not off track. It's not lost any timing. It's right on course the way that it's supposed to be. It's the same plan. It's the same story. We can trust what the Word says. We can absolutely stand on what the Word says. And we'll see we may see some exciting times coming up here. But again, there's things that have to happen that right now they don't look like they're ever going to happen. You know, how are you going to see Israel at peace right now? You just don't see that. However, there is a path, and I'm not saying it's probable, I'm not saying it's going to happen. All I'm saying is, for the first time in all of history, there is a path that it could happen. The places, the pieces are in place, but they have to fall like dominoes in a certain way. And that's, maybe I'll get into that, maybe I won't. But there's no guarantee they're gonna fall, there's no guarantee they're gonna fall like dominoes like they're supposed to. That's not my point. My point would be, this is the first time in history that it's possible. It's possible for these things to happen and one thing to lead right into another. So, because if you look at it right now, you don't, culturally, it's not going to change. It is going to take the hand of Yah in order for it to change. And we all know he can work, well, he did pretty good for 7 days, didn't he? Or 6 days and a rest, right? I think he did okay. So he can handle it. It's not beyond him. And it will happen in his time. Anyway, I hope you're following. This is it's an important journey to understand all that took place. The separation of Israel and Judah is instrumental. It's done by the hand of Yah. I've pointed out over the past many studies, I wills. When Yah says I will, he's driving this whole thing. He's in control. So if things start getting gnarly, remember that fact. Because even in the chaos, he's in control. You know, think about Yeshua on the water in the middle of that storm. All right? That's all I have. Any questions? Comments? Okie doke.
Well, I want to highlight just the heart of Daniel, you know, because he's repenting for his nation, you know. And I've always that's one of the things I actually admired most when I first read that book, because I think that's the heart condition we should really try to keep in mind for ourselves, you know, because you look at Yeshua on the cross, you look at Stephen, you know, forgive them, they know not what they do, you know. I mean, there's people that don't even know they need to repent. So us repenting and trying to act on their behalf, if you will, I think it's just there's something important to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anybody else? Okay, that's all I got. Now it's time to
Prepare our hearts to receive the blessing.